My name is Jerry Gill, and the date is March 9, 2009. I'm visiting with Dr. Earl Mitchell here in the OSU Library in the Angie DeBow Room on the campus of Oklahoma State University. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Dr. Mitchell, appreciate you being with us this morning, taking the time to visit with us. Wanted to kind of start off maybe at the beginning. And so my first question is, can you tell me a little bit about your early life, about your family, where you grew up?
Yeah, Jerry, I grew up in New Orleans. I'm part of what you call the lost generation because I was born right before World War II. And so I was a baby in the beginning of World War II. Young enough that I still remember, I was 3 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and I still remember those days. And my father spent a little time in the military, but he worked for the Army Air Corps during World War II in the early part before he went to the Navy. Now, it's interesting. My dad was a Navy man, but he spent the whole war in Nebraska. He was drafted toward the end because he was a guy with 7 children. And so he was drafted pretty much toward the end. So he went to the Navy and got to be a acting chief petty officer at that time. But I grew up in New Orleans in the projects, public housing. I spent the first 13 years of my life living in public housing, mainly because with 7 children, that's the only thing my dad could afford. So in the 40s and 50s, I grew up in New Orleans in the public housing. It was quite different in those days because remember that was very segregated. It was very segregated during those days, and so we had public housing for both white and black. And I grew up in an area called the Callio Project area, which is also where I went to high school in the area too. So I pretty much grew up in that part of New Orleans, which is about close to inner city, about 12 blocks from downtown Canal Street in that area. But it was an exciting time for me as a kid growing up in New Orleans because I had all the best of the worlds because my family was very close around. My grandmother and aunt lived about 12 blocks away, so we could walk to the house on Sunday. And like most kids during that time, you had relatives and family that was close around. I had cousins that lived around the corner from me on about half a block away, and they were the same age. I had cousins who were close to my same age. So there were the 5 Mitchell boys as we ran through the neighborhood. And we were kind of a little gang by ourselves, and which meant it was good because it was protection from all the other kids. Didn't mess with the Mitchell boys. But I was the one who was, I always consider myself to be the calm one. I had a cousin, Gill, who was the rough one. And Joe was kind of the leader. But something happened when I was 12 years old. Joe died from swimming in the Mississippi River. And it was a very traumatic experience for us because Joe was the oldest Mitchell boy. And when he died, that made me the oldest Mitchell boy. And it's been that way ever since. I've been the oldest in a family of 7 children in terms of cousins. And most of the cousins on my father's side of the family, I have only one that's still living today and survived. I had 3 cousins that died in the 40s and 50s. And they all died before 20 years old. 2 from illnesses and 1 from the accident. And Joe was the one that really impacted me quite strongly because he was kind of a leader, very good athlete and kind of a good leader. And we looked up to Joe as our leader. But growing up in New Orleans during that time, I went to school. I walked to school in the neighborhood. Those are the days where you saw the kids. We lived in a mixed neighborhood. So people don't realize in New Orleans you had a lot of mixtures of whites and blacks in the same neighborhood, but going to different schools. The white kids would bust out to go to white schools from the neighborhood. And we had friends that lived across the street. We had mostly Irish Americans, and we lived close to a place. There was the Irish Channel in New Orleans, so the blacks and the Irish lived pretty close together. We had a policeman that crossed the street that lived in the neighborhood. He's a white Irish policeman. His boys, I remember Mickey and Donald, we played with them. They went to school and went their way during the daytime, and the weekends we played together. But then eventually things changed over the years where the whites moved out and the fluent blacks moved out, because in those days in the projects, you had a mixture of people living in the projects. We had a large number of us who were, I'd say, middle class in terms of thinking, but you also had some people who were, in one sense, lower socioeconomic. We were too, but we didn't know we were poor because everybody was the same boat. But family was a really good part in those days growing up in New Orleans.
Earl, in your immediate family, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. I'm the oldest of 7. My mother had 7 kids, and I was the oldest at 6 years old. So she had a lot of kids to take care of at one time. And my brothers and sisters, we were all college graduates. 3 of us are PhD chemists, and one who couldn't do chemistry, he only could do math. And so he went to work for the federal government as a GAO accountant, and now he's teaching math at a small college in Dallas, Texas.
Earl, what was in your dad? What did he do after the war?
After the war, my dad became an employee of the federal government. He was a postal clerk at night. My dad had 3 jobs. All the time I saw my dad, he was either coming down the stairs from the bedroom going to work or sleeping, because he worked post office from 5 to 2:30 a.m. He would come home and get up at 9 and go to work because he worked for an insurance company. He collected insurance. In those days, you didn't. People didn't pay insurance. You had to collect. People come around and collected weekly. So he was an insurance collector, and he became a claim adjuster. But he did that for a long time. I remember my dad had at least 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs the whole time. My mother never worked outside the home. And the reason for that is because my dad would not allow her to work outside the home, because the only job she can get as a high school graduate, even though she was quite literate, was a domestic. And my dad would not have his wife being a domestic for anybody else. That was his, and he made that very clear. She's not going to clean anybody's house, she's going to clean her own house. That was his words.
Or where did the emphasis for education in your family come from? You said 3 of you had
Yes.
chemists, 1 was in math, and phenomenal.
And the sisters all, degrees, and 2 retired teachers now, public school teachers. Well, this came primarily from my dad and mom, primarily. One of the things we had around the house all the time were books. We had books. We took the newspaper every day. There are 2 newspapers, the morning paper and the evening paper. I remember we took the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans, the State Idents paper was the daily paper. We also had the black papers coming to the house, because as a little boy, my cousin and I, Joe, we sold the Louisiana Weekly and the Pittsburgh Courier. We sold papers on the corner. So we always had things to read around the house. One of the things I remember very strongly in those days, we went to many kids' homes, and you couldn't find a thing to read in the house. No paper, no newspaper, no books, nothing. But we had books around all the time, and it was important. My dad wanted to go to college but couldn't go. He's a Depression kid, and so he had to work very early, because his father did not really. He believed in hard work. My grandfather was on my dad's side was very hard work. Contrary, on my mother's side, her father was a preacher who actually had a college degree from Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. No, not Russ. Yeah, Russ College, Holly Springs. He was a teacher who decided to become a preacher because people took care of preachers better than they took care of teachers.
What was his denomination?
Baptist. He was a Baptist. And my dad was a Methodist. And I joined the Methodist church, so I grew up as a Baptist Methodist. And but the Methodist was a strong part of our family.
Well, in addition to education, are there other values you learned from your parents and experiences growing up that help mold and shape your life?
Yeah, I would guess my dad had a lot of pride. He was a very proud man, and he also pushed excellence. That was his strong thing. We used to have a interesting story about how Dad told us he wanted bragging material. Bragging material meant good grades. So he called it bragging. I did the same thing with my kids. I said, bring me some bragging material. So he said, bring me some good grades, bragging material, because my dad worked with a lot of people who were college graduates. He never could go. And he just wanted to show that his kids were smart and they could do well. And And my dad would have, I think, had the ability to do college. He tried to go to college on the GI Bill after World War II, but working two jobs, it was impossible for him to go to school, just impossible. And so I think the fact that he could not go, he wanted to be sure that his kids did. And my mother was also instrumental. My mother really pushed my sisters very strongly about education because she thought, well, you girls need to learn how to be independent. See, my mother had a concern all her life. She wanted to be more than just a housewife. That was her thing. But knowing that how noble that was at the time, because she felt she could have done other things and professionally. But she wanted her girls to have that independence, to get a degree so they can be independent and be professional. And my sisters tell me that. Now, I didn't know my mother was doing that to the girls. But my sisters told me that many years later. Mother had told them that they need to go to college, get a degree, because they needed to have something that they can fall back on.
Okay. Well, you enrolled at Xavier University?
Yeah,
is that in
Xavier in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember what about your decision? I guess was Xavier was it an all-black university?
Xavier's interesting, fascinating school. I had a high school teacher, chemistry teacher, Mr. Webster, James Webster was his name. And I was a pretty good student, and he was a graduate of Xavier and in teaching and science, and he thought that I should go to Xavier in chemistry, because Xavier had a reputation at the time for having a good pre-med pharmacy program in the sciences, very good, and still do today. But it's a historical black college. It's a Catholic school. It was the only coeducational Catholic college in the world, because they had to have special dispensation from the Pope to have that school exist. Founded by a woman from a very wealthy family in Philadelphia, the Drexels. So Catherine Drexel, who is now Saint Catherine Drexel, because she's been canonized as a saint. So Saint Catherine Drexel was the founder of this order of nuns called the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, whose responsibility was to provide service to Native Americans and to blacks in education. And they had schools in South Dakota, in Arizona, in the reservation, and in New Orleans. New Orleans became their flagship. But that school was run entirely on the money of Catherine Drexel's family, the Drexel family. The order and the school was run entirely by that person.
Did you pay tuition, or did you have a scholarship?
Tuition was very, very cheap. They kept tuition very low. I remember in those days, college costs for me at Xavier was $200 a semester, and it was hard to make. I worked in the summers to make enough money, and during the post office in the Christmas vacation, that's where I worked at the post office about 2 weeks, and usually made enough money. But my dad and I had my aunt, I had Aunt Anna, who I lived with while partly in college. She helped pay my tuition. I worked summers to make enough money to pay tuition, and 18-hour semester, 4 years, I was finished.
Earl, you talked about you had a high school teacher that interested in chemistry. Is that where your desire to major in chemistry came from?
Well, I was always good in science. And science and history are my two major areas of. Matter of fact, I had a minor in history from college and had a choice of going to law school because I had a professor, Dr. Paul Kunkel, who was a graduate of the University of Texas. He wanted me to go to law school, and he would have got me into Texas law school. But that was 1956, and I really didn't have the pioneering spirit to go to Texas. So, but chemistry was my first love, and so I decided to go in the chemistry direction.
After you got your undergraduate degree at Xavier, then you moved to Michigan State.
Yes.
Got your master's and doctorate. Can you talk a little bit about your experience there? And was that a little bit of a cultural shock for you going to Michigan?
Well, it was cultural shock, major cultural shock, because leaving New Orleans going to Michigan. Remember, I left in 1956. This was the beginning of the peak for the civil rights movement, civil rights and war and anti-war. I was involved in some civil rights activities in New Orleans. I was part of a New Orleans group which integrated the Dry Street area in New Orleans. There was a group of young businessmen, black businessmen, and also some young preachers who formed this coalition. And I was president of my senior class in college. And so as a senior class president, I became involved with that group as part of the group and did the picketing. And that was a year that our class was the first class at Xavier to not get class rings, because the person that sold the class rings to us was the leader of the White Citizens Council, which was what I call the Klan with ties on. So we decided to not get class rings that year, which I led as the president of the class, to show our support for civil rights activities. And we had to boycott and not get the class rings. So we were the first class to not get class rings that year. So we decided not to buy them. But that experience at Xavier was very good for me at the time, because when I went to Xavier, I went there as a young student interested in getting an education, going on to graduate school, and I had good mentors at Xavier. So going to Xavier was a positive thing. My brothers and sisters went to the other black schools. Dillard was the other school in town. My two brothers got their degrees in chemistry from Dillard. Dillard was a Methodist school, and I went to the Catholic school. A Methodist going to the Catholic school.
What? So you graduated Michigan State, and then I guess in 1967 you came to Oklahoma State
Yes.
as a research associate.
Let me go back and talk
Okay.
about Michigan State experience,
Okay,
because
sure.
I think you asked me the question on it.
Sure.
Michigan State was really quite a shock for me moving there, because when I moved to Michigan State, I moved from a segregated environment to a totally integrated environment, and had fantastic experiences there with all the people. When I first moved there, I came to Michigan State with a large trunk, which I traveled on the train. I rode the city of New Orleans train to Chicago, then from Chicago to East Lansing, and got off the station in East Lansing. I had to get a cab to get to campus. I had married student housing. I was there by myself. Bernice was not there. She stayed home we had one child. And so I went up with $10 to last me for the rest of the month until I got my first check. But I had a trunk that was loaded with goodies because my family had stuffed all sorts of things in my trunk. And so with $10, I could buy rice, I could buy chicken backs, and so 9 cents a pound for chicken necks and backs, and I could cook. So I could make myself some chicken, make some gravy, and get a little milk, because things were pretty cheap then. So the $10 lasted me the full month. I had enough food and cans of stuff in the trunk to last me for the month, because Bernice couldn't come until I got my first check, so I sent her money to buy the train ticket to come up to Michigan.
This was from your assistantship.
For my assistantship, so I graduate assistantship. And that was a great thing, because I had some young colleagues that kind of took me under the wing. Didn't have a car, it was cold, didn't have the clothes, it got cold in Michigan, and didn't know a thing about heavy coats. Never had to have one. And I finally found a place to get a coat, very cheap coat. Guy loaned me a coat, let me borrow a coat first, then I finally bought one. But then Bernice came the next month, and from that point on, we adjusted quite easily, and living off 2.22 per month was I remember that very distinctly. That was a lot of money for me, because I had not made over $150 a month in working in the summers. So that was pretty good. It paid the rent. I had enough money to pay the rent and food and buy baby food. But one of the tragic things at the time is I smoked. And so I buy a carton of cigarettes a month. And Bernice used to shake a finger at me and say, "This is enough that you're burning up that should be for baby food." So I quit smoking.
Real guilt trip.
Yes.
How would you characterize your experience there at Michigan State? Was it academically and socially?
Academically, first I was really worried, because I didn't know, coming from a black school, going up there and going to school with those kids who had been from MIT, and we had one from Harvard, we had some Big Ten schools, Ohio State, and there were a few kids from private schools like maybe St. Ola's College, I remember. I thought that, this is going to be very difficult. And I know that it was difficult to make. The first semester, I didn't do very well. And not doing very well meant that I did not make all A's. And Matter of fact, I got a couple of B's and a C in a course, physical chemistry course, which was really quite shocking to me at the time, because I felt that I should have earned a better grade than that. But I got a C my first semester, and I remember visiting with the department head about it, and he looked at me and he said, "Well, young man," he says, "you're not the only one." He says, "We have some students here from schools that are a lot better than yours. They got C's. They got worse grades than you." So he said, "Just settle down, and you'll make it. You'll be okay." And he was right. And so I settled down and decided to hit it a little harder, and knew what my abilities were, and didn't have any problems academically since from that point on. But the first semester was very traumatic because I didn't know whether I was going to stay there or not. And when you got a family and you don't know, and so it's somewhat miraculous to that extent. But I had good support from all the faculty there. My mentors were great mentors. I had good colleagues. It was the best experience like anyone could have had.
Earl, let me back up to myself. I meant to ask you, what was, when you talk about living in the projects, 7 kids, I guess, and then of course the parents 9 living in what? I mean, can you describe a little bit the home that you lived in?
Yeah.
A little bit that what that was like for you?
Yeah, we had a 3-bedroom place, and kids being small, that meant you had 4 and 3 in a room. The 3 boys, and we had 1 little baby boy who kind of slept with mom and dad in their room. But the 3 girls were in one room, baby girls, and 3 of the boys. We slept in one bed. 2 of us at one end, and 1 in the middle down the other end. So we had so we had feet in our faces. But we slept 3 in a bed, very very comfortable. We needed to get more space. One of us to sleep downstairs on the sofa. So we had an upstairs where the bedrooms were. We could have. And years later, we just used the living room sofa as a place to sleep. Pull out the bed at night, and then they would sleep 2 to a bed. So that worked out very well.
Earl, you finished your PhD in '67 at Michigan State.
In '66.
'66. Okay.
Right.
You came to Oklahoma State was in '67.
I came to Stillwater on January 1, 1967 at 4 p.m. We came to stay the Holiday Inn. We drove in from Michigan, left Michigan after the Christmas holidays, and drove pulling a 4-wheel U-Haul truck on the back of a new car I just bought at Oldsmobile. Just bought it before I left. And what's fascinating about that is I was a member of the Michigan State University Credit Union. So before I left town, I went and borrowed money, bought a car, and that was standard for the credit union. Students who left there were able to get loans because you had a job, and stayed members of the credit union. And I was a member of the credit union for a long time.
Earl, what influenced you to come to Oklahoma State University? Did you have a contact or know somebody here?
Yeah, George Waller sent a notice out, as in most researchers. They sent out notices to all the to other colleagues, other institutions, saying that a postdoctoral position open for research. And I saw that it came through. So I wrote him and told him I'll be finishing up sometimes in end of October, and I'd like to apply for this position. So he wrote me back and said, "Yeah, come on, I'd like to have you." And so now I had a position, so it gave me incentive to hurry and get my degree finished. So I wrote my dissertation. This was about 6 months before I finished. So I wrote the dissertation, got the research and completed, and I stayed on for 3 months as a postdoc at Michigan State to finish up some research work that I had done on the grant, and then came here to be involved with this great new instrument that he had called a mass spectrometer. As it turns out, George had one of the first GCMS, gas chromatograph, mass spectrometers in the country. It was built in Sweden, and it is now in the Smithsonian Institute as one of the first. And so I came here to work in the area. That's the hottest area going for studying small molecules. And so I came to be a part of that. And out of that, I was able to get a research publication in which we wanted to cover Science magazine for this particular story on the study of catnip, metabolism of ingredients of catnip. So in 1969, we had a cover story in Science for this research. Everybody had the 3 minutes of fame.
Was he department head or?
No, George was a professor, just professor. George Waller.
Mm-hmm.
And that instrument that he got, he had it moved here from Sweden. And actually, Henry Bellman, as governor, had to use the National Guard to transport it here to Stillwater. They had no other way of getting it here. So they used the National Guard to get this here because it's National Science Foundation grant that got the instrument and brought it here to Stillwater.
Well, what does it make you feel? It was cutting edge announcing the Smithsonian.
That's right. Yes.
A few years has elapsed. Right?
That's right. A few years lapsed. Yeah. So,
what do you remember about you shared a little bit. So the recruitment and interview process when you came here, you came here as a postdoc.
Right? Research associate. Okay. Yeah.
But now did you have to go through the process to actually get assistant
well,
professor, start the
yeah,
tenure, right?
the postdoc is a non-tenure-track position, faculty position, and the way the culture is in biochemistry, you have to do postdoctoral work before you even look for an academic position. And when I was here with George Waller, I worked pretty hard and was part of the laboratory, and had several projects that I initiated myself with George and with him. So I was kind of like a senior, like a junior faculty member in that sense, in terms of working with the department. I worked with students and did everything you can do except teach, but helped him in some of his classes, but mostly research. It's a good time. It's what you call a great honeymoon for anyone that finishes a PhD is a postdoc experience, because you have all the freedom in the world to do research and publish papers. That's the name of the game, publishing papers. And we published quite a few papers during that time. But the faculty position opened up here. Jimmy Webster retired, and there was a position open at OSU in biochemistry. And the interview process brought in a number of people who were coming from outside for the position. And I was here at the time and hadn't thought about staying here. But then the position opened up, and one of my colleagues said, in the department said, "Earl, why don't you apply for the position? The people coming in, some of them don't have the credentials you have. Why don't you apply for it?" And so I decided, well, I probably put my name in the hat. It was a good time. I'd been here 2 years. And so a position opened up for academically. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. I like it here, and I like the research, and I have some ideas on things I'd like to do. And I applied. And most of the people in the faculty, I think all of them, almost unanimous, said I was the one they wanted to keep around on the faculty. And that was very reassuring. And I was very fortunate because I was able to write a proposal, got 2 funded grants right away, NSF and NIH grants funded, and began the process of becoming a full faculty member, working on tenure, publishing papers, teaching, which I knew at that time that nothing was going to get me tenure other than having some good research, publishing, and doing good teaching. Doing one was not going to get it.
What were your first impressions of Oklahoma State when you came here? Like you came here with your Oldsmobile and
this is a great story.
In January, okay.
Yeah, this is a great story. My first impressions. I had never been west of the Mississippi, New Orleans, west of New Orleans in my life. And of course, Michigan is still the east, so that's still in the east. Coming to Oklahoma was quite a shock because I saw these people with cowboy hats on. Well, when you grow up in New Orleans, cowboy hats is Mardi Gras. So I thought there was some sort of this costume party. Everybody wearing these cowboy hats and boots. It was very different. But then I found that was real. But what's even more fascinating is the first year I was here, there was a fraternity called Kappa Alpha. They had a special program in which they acknowledged the Civil War. So they would ride across the campus on guns with these rebel outfits on and sabers. And I was going to the student union one day, and there were these guys riding out with these sabers and riding across campus. And I said, lo and behold, where am I? What is going on here? Well, as it turns out, the students weren't too pleased about that either. And the students thought that was rather ridiculous, silly, and they really panned him quite a bit for this rebel attitude, rebel yell. And I said I didn't know where I was at this time, but that was one of the interesting things about coming to Oklahoma, is seeing the complete Western culture.
Well, during your process when you come on board for your postdoc and then moving in the tenure-track position, did you ever feel that race was an issue at all in being because you were
Yeah.
one of the first black faculty members?
Right. I never felt race was an issue in my department, but it was an issue within the university. The thing that kept me here was that I had what I call a great bunch of colleagues. Race was not an issue. I was another scientist, and my acceptance was based on my ability to be a good scientist and to be productive. That's all that mattered. Race is material, but it wasn't difficult living in Stillwater and also being at the university, because the university as a whole. I remember my first evaluations from students. Comments on my evaluations was that, I remember this is very strongly said, this guy's okay, but he's not the kind of race I like. I mean, that's on the evaluation form. I got lots of things like that. But most of the students were very open, but there were a few that were difficult. But race was more of a difficulty for the family and for Bernice than for me on campus.
Who was department head at that time?
Roger Kepi, great department head. Roger Kepi grew up as a missionary. Parents were missionaries in China. So Roger had a very special concern about doing good things, and he had, in terms of equality, he felt very good about those kinds of things.
Earl, do you remember in the Department of Biochemistry at that time about where the classes were held?
Yes.
A little bit about the facilities. Could you share some of that information?
We were in the physical science building, but classes were held pretty much all over campus. And one of my first year teaching, I taught my second year teaching, I taught the vet students, which was a course for all the vet students that was taught 7:30 in the morning. And that class met out at the vet med building. And the building where they kept is where they did large animal exhibits, and it was a hard floor in which you had the chairs were further back, and with the floor in front, so you bring horses and large animals in, it meant you had to bring a board that was on wheels, a rolling blackboard. And so every morning before class, 3 times a week, I have to come in, move a desk, move that rolling blackboard, prop a desk behind it so it wouldn't roll as I taught, as I wrote on it, and use that to give my lecture. No lecturing, and give my lecture and write on the board, because those days before we had good overhead projectors and video equipment. So everything had to be written on the board, and so I had to write on that board, and every now and then it would slip and start sliding as I was writing on the board. It would start right across it would roll across. That was the first experience.
So you had to get there early.
Get there very early for a 7:30 class. So I taught 7:30 classes for the first 15 years here. And I had the last 7:30 class on Saturday morning, the last one taught. And it was for the vet students. They had a laboratory at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, which is to come and open up the lab and have them come do their laboratory work. But then the vet school decided to make biochemistry a prerequisite rather than part of the curriculum, because these students took biochemistry at 7:30 in the morning, the toughest course they could have besides anatomy. And it was very hard. I know, 7:30. It went from class from 7:30 to 5 days a week, and on Saturdays. One year I had a starting tight end who was a vet student who never made any Saturday class because of football in the fall. He got a B in the course with no problem.
Did you have in addition to Dr. Waller, did you have some mentors or faculty members who were especially helpful to you in those early years?
Well, yeah, there were a number of, we were all colleagues, and so we worked together. E.C. Nelson is probably one, because we published together. I remember Kermit Carey was no longer here. We were very close friends. Kurt Ebner, who left here. Bob Golson, who retired. We did some work together too. And George Odell. George Odell was also my neighbor down the street from where I lived. So that was rather nice. And E.C. Nelson lived around the corner, not too far from me. So we were the East Siders, we call ourselves. So we had a very great camaraderie with each other in the department. So we shared things, and that was a nice thing about it. See, in biochemistry, I knew of many departments where each person had their own fiefdom. That's pretty typical. But Oklahoma State University, we shared equipment with each other, and we helped each other, and that still goes on today. That was the thing that made life so much easier, so much simpler, is that we were very cooperative with each other, and that really helped quite a bit.
Earl, am I correct, and maybe you can correct me here, but were you the first African American to get tenure at Oklahoma State University, or at least one early on? I'm not sure about that.
Well, I think Lionel Arnold came here as a full professor, as a tenured professor. I think I had received tenure by that time. By the time he got here, I was tenured. I was probably the first to receive tenure, but he was the first professor, and he moved here from Lemoyne College in the Department of Religion at the time, or Humanities, and he retired. But he was the first African American who was a full professor at OSU.
But you were the first to receive tenure.
I was the first to receive tenure through the ranks of going up and promotions all the way up.
Is that special to you when you look back and reflect on that?
Yeah, now that I look back on it, it was special. But at the time, it was just a normal progression of the way we did things in the department. I wasn't different than anybody else. And remember, we had people in the department who did not get tenure. So getting tenure in the department, Roger Kepi was in somewhat genius in looking at that, because he evaluated people very early, and he could probably tell if you were tenure very early. So we had at that time, he would do early promotion for tenure. You could get tenure 3 or 4 years. There were certain signs that you were going to be productive, and those signs were if you became a member of the society, and you were able to get grants, and you had good evaluation for teaching, then tenure was going to be an option right away, because there were good signs and that you were going to be, and you had some stature in the profession. That was the main thing. And if you did not have those, then you were not going to get tenure. And he's made it very clear from the beginning. You can fill out your years, but you're not going to get tenure.
Earl, you alluded earlier, you may want to expand on it, but how well were you received by your faculty members, as you indicated, by teachers, by students?
I've had no problems in terms of being received by my colleagues, even across campus, because I became involved in a number of different committees and part of the university. And I think part of it is that I became actively involved in the academia and the profession. I remember one of the early courses that was started by Dan Kroll, who was in English. Dan Kroll thought we should have a course on peace. So he put together a seminar series in which I was one of the organizers of it, to give some talks on peace, because he said, in the university, we have lots of courses on war. In history of war, we have war and all behavior. He said, but there's not one course on peace. And so he put together a seminar, and I still say today that we don't have any courses on peace as such. I think irinology is something, the term used, I-R-E-N-O-L-O-G-Y, irinology, study of peace. And they always thought we should have a course on peace. And no one's ever followed that through since.
Well, expand on that question a little bit, Earl. What was the OSU environment like for African American faculty generally in the late 60s?
In the late 60s, again, I have to preface my experiences with the department. There were other faculty members that came here that did not have even close experience I had, because they never had a relationship in their departments. And so we had a lot of turnover. We had departments that did not accept their faculty members very well. Let me give you one example. we tried to establish a Black Studies program that was pushed by the students. And I chaired a committee. And Jay Boggs was interested in establishing some academic units in this area. So he thought, good idea. Why don't we get some people in these African American studies areas, develop an area? And he put together a budget to hire 3 new faculty in the area. Now, when he put that budget out and offered to hire 3 new faculty members, the committee started looking, well, let's look at where they would be with departments. Well, I'm not going to mention the name, but there was one department at the time that would not even consider the idea. Even though it would not cost them anything in terms of budget, it was not going to take away any positions from them. They didn't want to have any part of it. And they made it very clear they were not going to cooperate. You cannot get things done if faculty won't cooperate. And so we had a chance to hire really 3 new minority faculty members. That was 1972. And Jay was willing to do that and put the money up because as the vice president of academic affairs, he controlled all the money. So he could establish that. And this department was not interested at all, whether in the area, would not accept them. Those are the kind of things that was for other blacks on the campus. So we had a lot of turnover, and people had difficulty. I think the only reason I was able to not have those problems because I had an environment that was very, very protective and very reassuring, because as long as I was being productive as a scientist, I could be involved in many other things, and I was involved with other things that were controversial in terms of diversity. But knowing that I had to write papers, had to do research, to produce students, that was an honest task that I think people don't understand, because my time in doing these other things, I made sure it did not detract from my main responsibility. So I knew I still had to do that. So what happened? On weekends, I'd be here on weekends. I'd go home, put the kids to bed, come back to the lab at night. That was pretty standard. Saturday was a standard time to go to the office. Every Saturday morning, we go, and that's when I'd sit down and read the journals and get field experiments done. Also was teaching too. So family and job all became intertwined, and that's what made it interesting. I only took maximum 2 weeks vacation. I had 22 days a year. I think for the first 15, 20 years, we only took the 2 weeks of August vacation. That's all we ever took.
Earl, what do you recall what the black student experience was like at that time?
Yeah, when I came, the black students were pretty much isolated. They had difficulty with class. They had difficulty with some faculty. Depends on what class they were at. Especially difficulty with other students, because the system was that if you were part of a sorority or fraternity, you had access to a lot of information. And the black students had that information, and people wouldn't share it with them. And the African American Students Association was formed in 1968, and I was the first advisor, because students were concerned about their own education and wanted to organize in some fashion that they could have some impact on their own education. Remember, the town was very much segregated at the time. You had South Stillwater, which there was a place, the South. The only church the students went to was the Mount Zion, the black churches. Students didn't go to many churches in this town. We had a system whereby international students were very much welcome in the homes of most of the people in town, but not of African American students. And the students knew that. And that was the thing that really kind of disturbed me, that we had all this open arms for international students, particularly Ethiopian students, but yet African American students were not welcome. They were strangers in their own home, because being African American, people say, you're not foreign, you're just like everybody else. But no one would welcome them to their homes. You had no home program for black students.
Well, you talked about being the faculty advisor to the Afro-Am Student Association, first one. Did you have students that would come to you for personal advice and academic advice?
Yes, I had a number of students came to me all sorts of problems. A lot of problems stem in the classroom. It stemmed from feelings of not being treated fairly. That was most of the problems. Many of those I could deal with because on some occasions I could contact faculty members who didn't have a clue as to what they were doing. And that was interesting because in some cases I knew the faculty and I could talk to them about what was happening to the student so they could make the student feel more welcome into the program. And many did. Interestingly, when the students left campus with a black student boycott, when they came back, the faculty were very open to let the students make up the work. The difficulty the students had were from graduate assistants, from some of those other white students who were graduate assistants. They were the worst in terms of behavior toward the students. Faculty were very, very helpful and very understanding of the students, and that was a reassuring thing for me at the time.
You alluded to the environment in Stillwater for your family. I mean, could you expand that? We talked about here at Oklahoma State University.
Yeah, let me give you some specific examples. Even though we lived on the east side of town, and only the second family to move out to live outside of the south side of Stillwater, Sylvester Combs, the other family that lived in Stillwater, they lived on the west side. We lived on the east side.
Sam Combs.
No, not Sam. Sylvester's brother.
Sylvester's brother. Okay.
Yeah, his wife worked for extension service at OSU. But and Sylvester taught at the middle school. He taught shop. But to say about things being off limits, my son Doug spent a weekend in jail when he was 16 years old. We went to Chicago. I never told this story before, but I can tell it now. We went to Chicago with Bob Weber and Gloria Weber. We went to Chicago to see the King Tut exhibit. And we left the kids here. Michael was with a friend, and Karen was old enough to stay at home, and Doug was at home. And Doug was 16 because Doug worked for the student union at the time they hired him, so he was going to work. We were gone for a long weekend. We left on Thursday and came back on Wednesday and came back on Saturday. I got back home on Saturday, and the house was clean, and it looked like nobody had been there for a couple of days. So I figured Doug was at work. So I went over to student union to find out, and they said no, he never showed up for work. So now, panic, where's Doug? What happened? I called Karen, and Karen said she didn't know, she had not heard from him. Well, it's interesting, about 10 minutes later, I was in the house, I get to call the police, put out an APB out, say my son's missing. And I got a call from Paul Anderson. Paul Anderson was a lawyer at the time. He said, Earl, he says, did you know your son is locked up in jail? No, I didn't. He said, he's down there. He says, we can get him out. If you come down, I'll get him released. Paul was not a DA at the time, he was a lawyer. So I went down, and Doug was just, he was scared. He was more scared because he thought Dad was going to be upset with him. And I found out what happened. Well, Doug on Friday, Doug and Jerome Clark was a wrestler, ended up going to the Naval Academy. He got a degree in the Naval Academy. Jerome Clark, they went to play basketball. The high school was open for basketball, so Doug went to play basketball on Friday. And while playing basketball, a little girl, Kelly, who lives up on, I think, Osage Street, said, why don't you come by later, come by the house. And her family, they had a pool. And so he was going to go by Kelly and swim because her mother invited the kids to come over. And so Doug had the car. So he parked on the corner under the light, walked across his lawn, and didn't quite know where the house was, so he came back to the car. Meanwhile, the person who lived in that corner house called the police, said there's a black prowler in the neighborhood. So Doug got out, went and stepped on the porch and knocked on the door, and he knocked on the door. A police said, freeze. And the woman opened the door, came in, and the police said, we've got this peeping Tom here, this burglar coming here. She said, oh, Doug. She said, Kelly, Doug is here. And the police said, no, he's a trespasser, peeping Tom. And so she said, and the lady said, well, can you let him stay here because we know him? He said, no, I got to take him in. So he took him in, and he called Judge I can't remember the judge who handled juveniles at the time, called the judge, not Judge York, and he asked, I've got a Negro subject here, parents can't be found, what to do? And he said, well, hold him until we can arraign him on Monday. So he took him and put him down in the county jail. And Doug said, I need to make a phone call. I need to call and let people know where I am. Well, here's the clincher. Doug knew and Karen knew if they needed any help, they were to call Ray Wall, the district judge. Bernice was the bailiff at the district judge. And they would not let him make a phone call. And Ray was just livid when he found out about that. And Doug was not allowed to make a phone call. And so when I got there and took him home, I reassured Doug that he did nothing wrong. And there's no, and this is where Doug got a lesson too, because Doug really found out that there's some places that's off limit to him as a black when they're around in Stillwater. And but it was a lesson to him. But I also wanted to give him another lesson, that he did nothing wrong and that his parents were supportive. So on Monday morning, I contacted the judge and I contacted Eli, Captain Eli, and we met with the policeman face to face to talk about this incident. Captain Eli was just outraged that this would happen. And so was the judge. But here's what's interesting. The judge said, well, if you told me it was Earl Mitchell's kid, it was okay. Well, that adds to the problem. Yeah. That means that he's, only because he's Earl Mitchell's kid, but he was seen as just another black kid in the neighborhood. And so Doug had that was quite an experience, but also he also knew that his parents were supportive, and he learned something about, because he had been friends with some of the kids in the neighborhood that people knew. And he was a good kid, and to spend the night in jail. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. That policeman who pulled a gun on him is the one that later killed a teenager in a chase because he thought the kid had a gun. So I think, well, that's really, we were lucky, because if Doug had done any move, he would have been dead. So that's an experience that you get as a black living in Stillwater. And Karen spent time, she was at the Girl Scout camp when the Girl Scouts were killed. She was one of the training cadets there. So she experienced the rape and murder of those Girl Scout kids. She was there at the camp at the time as one of the leaders, and was a witness in the case against Jean Leroy Hart, because they found some of her things from her locker that was found in a cave that he had. It was a mirror that she had as a little kid, and a hat with a corncob pipe that I had bought her. They found that in his possession because he had broken the camp that weekend and broke into her and took those things out. So she was a witness to identify those things. So those kind of experiences you have as a family member.
Earl, but back then, about the time you had tenure in the early 70s, but how many black professors did we have on campus at that time? What numbers are you talking about?
Well, we went through a number of 8, 10, 11, because people came and went very fast. So we had, I think, the height in the 70s at about 11 at the time. And there were various levels of faculty. Some were instructors, some were assistant professors. But those were the tenure-track people, not very many.
Well, were there some other black faculty that you remember from that era that stand out in your mind? Oh, yeah.
Well, of course, Lionel Arnold was one, because Bernice was he was Bernice's advisor, and she got one of the few people with a degree in the area that no longer exists anymore in humanities. So Lionel Arnold was one. George Taylor, who left here and went to Virginia State, and is now retired. But George was in the sociology department, and he and I were good friends, good colleagues, working with the students. And George was in the corrections area, so he knew a lot about corrections. Those were the two who were probably. Nudie Williams was another one. Nudie got his degree here and was on instructor history. He's deceased now, but Nudie was another one who was. See, Nudie had a degree in biology, so we were scientists first, but he went history and did very well in history.
Were there any special concerns or issues that black faculty had at that time?
Yeah, the main concern of black faculty were students and getting more black faculty. That's always been a concern. Getting more people who look like us for the students and who could go through in all areas of the university. The College of Education probably had more consistent people hired, tenure-track people. They had the largest number in any one time College of Education. And Katy Perry is still a good friend, and she's been through it. Vanjie McGlon is retired. I remember Vanjie McGlon was retired. And Betty Gaffney, who just died recently, was a good, stable person on the university. And they were always very helpful to students. Having those faculty members over in College of Education at HEW was really, HES, was really very helpful to having black students over there.
Earl, you're talking about average somewhere around 11 or 12, faculty members coming and going, but there's a lot of African American students at that time. I mean, that ratio of instructors to African American students was pretty high, wasn't it?
Yeah, we got up to close to 1,000 or so African American students here on the campus, which is quite a large number. Right. And it dropped down to as low as 500, 400 at one time. When I went in as associate vice president, the numbers was down to 400. We started working to get the numbers back up again. But engineering has done a marvelous job in getting students in that area, recruiting. Matter of fact, I think it's been outstanding in that sense.
Earl, I'm going to go ahead and stop here.
Yeah.
Okay. Earl, we were talking a little bit about black faculty staff issues, but about that time, and maybe you remember the year it was, but the Black Faculty Staff Association was formed.
Yes.
Do you remember a little bit about that? Could you share some information with us on
that? Yeah, the feeling, most of us at the time, that we needed to have some sort of an organization for two purposes. One, for our own camaraderie, and two, to do what we could to help students. And so the first thing we did when we formed the organization was establish a scholarship committee because we thought we should give students financial help when we can, not very much, but it was a gesture we thought was important because our primary mission, our primary goal for being here was to help students, even though we had a professional responsibility too. So we formed an organization and primary for some, in terms of some social activities too. So we just get together. We are all separated, and just like the students don't realize this either. But see, students who go to class, there are very few black students will see other black students in their classes. Even though this large campus and we have a large number of black students, they don't necessarily be in the same class with each other. Very rarely you have the same class. That same thing happens to us. We are isolated too, because we're in our disciplines, and we don't get together very often because we're so isolated. And I think the students don't understand that either. But we thought having a Black Faculty Staff Association will give us a chance to know each other, know where we are, and also do some mentoring to each other. One of the things that I took it upon myself to do is to try and talk to the younger faculty members about what was required to get tenure. That was an interesting part because getting tenure varied quite a bit on the campus depending upon the discipline. But if you were African American or black, you had to be sure that you did all the things. You could not do what everybody else did to get tenure. Let's put it that way. For example, if joining the Kiwanis Club and being involved with other activities help you to get tenure in the department, if you're black, that wouldn't work. You've got to publish papers. You got to write your books. You got to teach your classes. So that's important it's important that you understand that's important to get tenure. Everything else is immaterial. So all the extra things you do that seem nice and something that people appreciate won't get you tenure. So that was part of what I figured was my responsibility, to let them know that component of the academe, what it meant.
Earl, do you remember what year you formed the Black Faculty Staff Association?
Yeah, that was formed
Approximately.
in the mid-'70s. Someplace in the mid-'70s. I remember George Taylor was here when we first got the group together.
Do you remember some of the early leaders in the organization?
Like I said, George Taylor was one. Tom Wetzel came involved later. In the early stages, Nudie Williams was part of it, even though he was an instructor, still a graduate student. Katy Perry and Betty Gaffney, they were all part of it, all members of the Black Faculty staff.
Patricia Bell here at that time.
Pat came about 78 and got involved, 78, 79, she came about that time and got involved in it, yes.
Earl, you talked about scholarships. Were there other goals and issues that you remember you had as an organization those early years?
I think the scholarships were the primary issues, and also supporting students in any kind of controversial activity with students. We were there with them from the beginning, involved with the students, and primary as a supportive and calm, what I call supportive and calming influence. Supportive in terms of letting the students know that they had support from us, but calming in the sense that it's important that you don't go too far, that you don't push things too far that will be problematic for everybody else. And that doesn't mean backing down. It meant just doing things in a proper manner.
Earl, one of the other issues I was going to ask you about is, was there a connectivity in any way with the faculty council in terms of structured under the organization, outside of that organization?
Well, the only thing the Black faculty staff was able to do with faculty council was to convince the faculty council that they need to have representation from minority faculty. And so we have a position that they created, a minority position to represent minorities on the faculty. And that was something that we pushed as part of the Black faculty staff. There's a Native American faculty staff and there's a Hispanic faculty staff group, but we were the ones that started it and pushed it. But what's interesting about that process is that if you look at the number of minority faculty, the largest group are Asian. We have well over 100 some Asian faculty. So when you go through the faculty council election process, it's very difficult for any black to get elected because you have more Asians voting than the blacks. So I think I was the only one elected one time to represent the minority faculty.
Well, Earl, maybe changing the focus of the conversation just a little bit, back on you personally and professionally. Can you briefly review your academic career in teaching, research, particularly emphasis on teaching and research? We'll talk about your administrative responsibilities maybe later.
Right.
At OSU, and share some of your professional accomplishments and highlights.
Well, in teaching, I was just one of the men in the Department of Biochemistry. Teaching biochemistry is not an easy subject to teach to most students because the vast majority of students really don't want to be there. And the course I taught for a long time was a course for ex-students, which was required to take chemistry, this chemistry course. And most of them really didn't see any sense in taking it. So that creates an onerous task to teach a course where students really don't want to be there. And they have a course at 7:30 in the morning, just adds to the problem. So you have to try and make it interesting, but at the same time, there's a need to make sure the students are knowledge-based in terms of information. So teaching the course, as most of us have, we are not known as great teachers about it. None of us will ever win any teaching awards, mainly because of the style of teaching and the difficulty of the course. The course is easy, we would get awards, but it's not easy. And so you have to divide the grades up, and the grades will run from A to F with lots of C's and sometimes lots of D's. So that makes it difficult teaching. Now, as a faculty member, you know that, but you feel you you have to try to open their heads up and put the knowledge in, whether they want it or not. And that is the style of teaching. So you try all sorts of mechanisms and procedures to do that. You spend a lot of time with them one-on-one. I was always available to students and would spend time with special help sessions. I ran these help sessions, which was outside the lecture period, and we set times up where students would come for an hour, and we set 2 or 3 hours up where I'd be available for them to come as a group and ask questions. This is outside the class, but all students can't do this, so I try to have times where students can come. So putting the extra time on myself. Now, didn't have to do that, but I felt it was important to try to give students some extra help, personally from me, outside of the lecture period, because it's very difficult because there's a lot of information to cover in biochemistry, and it comes so fast and so quick to these students, and they're not used to the terminology. The first thing you have to learn in biochemistry is the vocabulary. The vocabulary is also attached to the knowledge, because the words that are used to describe the pathways also tell you something about the pathways. And if you don't understand the words, then you can't understand the conversation at all. And so that's the first difficult problem. In teaching and research, they go together. And in biochemistry, we make sure they go together. So we try to incorporate the research part in your teaching. So as things are being developed in the scientific world in biochemistry, you bring it up in your classroom so that they can have some sort of feeling for what's happening in the real world with what we teach them on this pathway. So that's pretty much the concept of teaching. And it's strictly lecture style with information. I think is with the PowerPoint presentations now and all the information we provide to them, it's a little different.
Well, what about your research? You probably wouldn't say it, but you received some pretty significant recognitions and awards in your lifetime. I'm thinking of some like Distinguished 100 African American Scientists of the 20th Century.
Yes.
Pretty impressive. Member of the board of the Oklahoma School of Science and Mathematics. Special research recognition. Could you share a little about your research with us?
Yeah, my research is I consider it to be just average research for a biochemist. And it really is nothing outstanding, exciting, except that I think the few things that I've done, like I say, the having a story to cover science is, you reach a peak and from that point it's downhill. But I think being a teacher of science and also being involved in research gives me something very special to offer in terms of the public. For example, being involved with the School of Science and Math, it's because I was a scientist and been involved with research grants, writing papers, publishing papers, doing research, having students. I think that kind of experience helps me to work in what I call the real world. And so being involved in the School of Science and Math was quite an accolade for me, because I was instrumental in getting it started. And again, it's because of my interest in the next generation of scientists and how we can transfer information to some of our brightest students. And that's always a problem. Sometimes the most discriminated people in the world are the very smart. They're sometimes left out of a lot of things.
And for those, just background information, the Oklahoma Science and Math School was a special school for bright students.
Yes, it's it's one of the few state-supported resident schools for our very bright students in Oklahoma. And so it's a statewide school in which students come from all over the state to get this special curriculum. That's a college curriculum for these students for the 2 years they're in high school. And they go on to do marvelous things, and we've seen some great results from these students today.
You served on that board. Did you ever help in the curriculum development or anything there?
No, as a board, we're just overseers. As a board, we just hire the best director we could find, the principal and the president, and just turn it loose.
Earl, were you involved? Was OCAM part of your academic side of it, or is that later?
No, in 1994, the state regions formed a group called the Minorities in Science, Underrepresented Minorities in Science. Oklahoma Science and Math for Minorities. They formed an organization of all the colleges in the state. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in that and became chair of that board for they call the AMP program, Science Math Program. It's an alliance of schools, alliance for science and math in terms of college. The purpose of the alliance is to enhance the number of underrepresented minorities, that is Black, Hispanic, Native American, Pacific Islanders, earning degrees in science and math and technology in the state of Oklahoma. And from that, I was able to write a grant and get funding from the National Science Foundation for this alliance, which has lasted for 15 years.
And it's a summer program, Earl, isn't it?
Its summer program is one, but it supports students in an academic year in 9 campuses, OSU being the lead institution. We support students with stipends, and they do summer internship and research. The idea is to have them graduate and go to graduate school and get the PhD in the science and math area. That's the goal, or go to work in the science industry. And we've been very successful in supporting a lot of students who've gone on and get their PhDs. We have a second phase of that program now called the Bridge to Doctorate program, in which the students will be going into graduate school to bridge from the baccalaureate to the doctorate. And the grant will support them for 2 years, and then the university will find a way to get them a PhD later. We have several people who earned their PhDs now.
Well, speaking of that, Earl, are there some, in your experience in those programs, but also as a faculty member at Oklahoma State, are there some students that you've mentored and tutored and personally counseled that stand out in your mind that is special?
Yeah, I just got a note from one the other day. She's a young lady who is now worked for General Motors, Sandra McNeil. She got a degree in engineering, and she was the first student we had here. She's an African American student. As a matter of fact, she's mixed. Her mother's German, but her father was military, and so she speaks German. She spent a year in Germany as an undergraduate at a research institute in Germany. And now she's back in Germany. She went to work for General Motors, and she worked in Oklahoma City, and she moved to Dallas, and they have moved her to Germany to work for General Motors in connection with research in Germany. And I'm trying to get her to come back and get a PhD. But that's one of the students. We have another student who's now in Sweden getting a PhD. He was a student here at OSU and worked for Ulrich Melch in biochemistry. And he is now in Sweden, earned a PhD in Sweden in biochemistry. So those students kind of stand out.
Earl, also, you served many years as Associate Vice President for Multicultural Affairs. Can you talk about some of the initiatives during that period that you put in place and give us a little information about some of the things you did in those areas?
Yeah, that particular program during the time considered 2 components. One is what I call the affirmative action component, in which we develop programs I developed for women's studies as part of the diversity part of the university. The affirmative action program, which Dr. Carolyn Hernandez was part of, I hired her, and she established all the guidelines and rules for our affirmative action program. And then the other initiatives which I set up were primarily for students in terms of diversity. For example, the talent search program and the science and math program and the Lower Stokes AMP program, all those were part of the initiative that set up. The talent search was a TRIO program, which is going great guns now, which I first wrote the proposal with Mary Lawler, and now Deborah has the program, and she's doing doing an excellent job in running the program. This is a program to get high school students prepared for college, low socioeconomic high school students. And we chose the area that's been left out. That is the rural areas that covers all the surrounding counties around Oklahoma, going as far as Okmulgee. And because rural students are pretty much left out. And the idea is to increase the number of college graduates from many of these young people in these small rural areas. And she's doing a great job in terms of the program.
What, looking back, I mean, you mentioned those things, but there were some successes that you had that you're proud of, that you think back on in the affirmative action area and in that whole area of multicultural affairs.
Yeah, some of the success in affirmative action, which probably no longer exists, and one was a program that we had developed that was incentive programs for hiring of minority faculty. That is a minority incentive program in which we would supply, at least the vice president would supply funds for hiring minority faculty and being aggressive about doing it. And we have a procedure which is accepted by the Department of Labor in terms of target recruitment. So those are the things that push very strongly and to increase the number of faculty. That would be one of the really strong things that I think we had at one time that was very helpful.
Earl, are there still unresolved issues that need to be worked on that you can think of?
Well, the unresolved issue is always going to be hiring of minority faculty. Mainly because the one part of this unresolved issue is a concept that I have never been able to get anybody to buy into. And it's something that Jay Boggs talked about in 1972. Jay Boggs said that if we can't find people, then we need to grow our own. Well, people took that and just said, it's crazy. When I came here, I found a lot of faculty members were getting degrees at Oklahoma State University and joined the faculty. Some would go off who wanted the faculty and get a PhD someplace else and then come back. I think Carl Reed was MIT, and I remember Charlie Bacon was in graduate school with me in Michigan State, and he came here on the faculty. He was on the faculty with Michigan State, got his PhD in engineering, came back, became department head. Agriculture was full of. So why couldn't we have a program like that for African Americans? Why can't we make the initiative to have a program to produce more in the graduate program? If we can't find them, then why don't we have a program to get them? This Bridge to Doctor program the federal government has put together is money supported by NSF, but that's only one area. But we need people in all areas, humanities, in education, in vet med, all the areas we need people. Why can't the graduate college or the graduate dean or the vice president of research develop a program to enhance the number of minority graduates in graduate school? I've been arguing that for 40 years. No one wants to do it. No one believes it. And that's the only way it's going to get done. You can continue to talk about not having enough people, but until you start producing them, you're always not going to have enough people. And no one will take that on. And I tip my hat to Jay Boggs who wanted to do it, but he couldn't get people to buy into it. He would have supplied the money. But I'm not sure that there's no commitment. There isn't a commitment now to do that now with the administration. There is no commitment for this sort of thing.
Well, Earl, looking back over the years, he's going back there to the late 60s, early 70s when you come to Oklahoma State. Has the environment for black students at Oklahoma State University changed? And so how's it evolved over the years?
Oh, it has changed drastically. When I see the number of students that are involved, well, just last week, I went to the Masterworks concert. And when I go to these things, I count the number of black faces in there. I still do that. Where I go, I still see how many black faces in there. I saw more black students involved, and outstanding student, a freshman, who is plays the cello. Plays the bass. Outstanding student. Two black students on the bass playing. One of them was in the first part. He was one of the students running around hooking everything up. And I said to my eyes, "Oh my God, they got a black student to do all the hard work." It turned out he was a student on the bass, one of the best bass players out there. So you have to be careful how you think about these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's changed drastically in terms of acceptance. There are many white students who understand how it used to be, but there still is some bits of racism still exists because it's a learned thing. It's nothing that you are born with. You learn it from behavior and how other people behave.
Earl, on a broader stage, outside of the academy, you've had a passion for human rights and issues, and you've been socially and politically active. For many years. Can you share some of your activities in this arena? Yeah,
I became immediately involved with the civil rights when I first came to Stillwater. I became involved with we had a local NAACP chapter called the Payne County chapter NAACP. And I became immediately involved with that chapter. It existed primarily in the black community. And there were virtually a few people there, Ruby Cook and Thelma Connors and several other people in the community were involved. And I became involved in it and became the president of the chapter. And I brought in more people in the community to be involved outside the black community. So we had a very active chapter in looking at, and our primary focus was equality for the students in Stillwater. And at that time, when I first came, Washington School was still in existence. That is, it was the last of the segregated schools. Even though Lee Ward had been moved to Highland Park School as principal, Washington School still had a few classes left and it was being closed up. The black kids were still not part of the school system. See, Donut School. I remember writing a letter to the newspaper when Stillwater had an all-white football team. There were a lot of black kids who didn't play football. They were not welcome at that time on the team. And I remember writing a letter saying, I can understand a team that would rather lose with all whites than to win with a few blacks. News press. I wrote a letter saying that. Kind of stirred people up a little bit, thinking a little bit about it. And made some people mad, but that's what you're supposed to do. And so I spent a lot of time working with the black kids, trying to get them in the community and helping them to do things right. And I think we missed an opportunity because there were several kids who went through a school system at the time who probably would have come out quite a bit different if they had an opportunity to participate in sports. And there were some very good kids at the time who missed out on the opportunity in Stillwater to do that. And that was the culture at the time. Very segregated because all the black kids still lived in South Stillwater, went to school and went home. There was a private group called TOGs, which is a girls' sorority type thing at high school. They didn't take any black kids in it at all. No black kids could be part of the TOGs. And we complained about that. Even though for me, it's like, who the hell wants to be part of a group like that anyway? It's like Dick Gregory said. He marched in a Walgreens one day, and people said, oh, here they come. And he said, who the hell want to integrate Walgreens? So I don't understand. I'm not really a fraternity person. I support them, but and kids need to have that. Some kids have that, but it's not something that I really would automatically tell kids they ought to do. I understand the system, but it's important for some kids to be part of it.
Earl, you were active at the statewide level, I think, as well.
Yes, with the state and ACP, I was active. I was active with ACLU too, very much active. I was vice chair of the ACLU at the time when they had the prison riot down in McAllister. I was vice chair. Also with the Bobby Battle case, we were involved with that. And Lou Bullock was involved and took over some of the cases there. That's where I got to meet Angie DeBoe, because Angie was on the board, and on occasion, we would drive to Marshall to pick her up and take her to the board meetings. And so I got to spend a little bit of time with Angie DeBoe and got to know her quite well. Became one of her persons on her mailing list that she would call to write letters when she needed them to do something for Native Americans. But if you didn't write the letter, she took you off her list, and she'd tell you why. If you didn't write a letter, she was very bold about that. If you're not going to write a letter, then I don't want your name. So when Angie called, you moved.
That's great. What have been, you touched on a couple of things, but have there been some highlights in your engagement in the civil rights arena through the years?
Well, I think in terms of working with ACLU during the time when we had the prison riots and also the changes that occurred with the Bobby Battle case, which we took on as ACLU project, and changing the prison system, that was really important. Prison system still needs a lot of work. We still incarcerate too many people for minor things. I think that was a really important part for me at the time. And with the state and ASCP, we were supportive of the initiatives in terms of school integration and busing, because I was a member and chaired the advisory committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And we had produced several documents and reports on studies. Our major report we put on was the study of the integration of Tulsa. During the busing period, this is the early 70s or mid 70s, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights decided to do a study of busing around the country and how communities handle their integration problem. Tulsa did something that was very unique and very different. If you remember, Tulsa didn't have the kind of placard problems that Oklahoma City has with busing. Tulsa decided to go with the magnet school concept and develop Washington School as a magnet school. And that has worked very well for Tulsa in terms of integrating the school system. And that was one of the things we wrote up in our report as a really a monumental thing in terms of handling the problem. And it diffused quite a bit. So even though Tulsa, with the race riot and the long history, they managed to do their school integration a lot different and a lot better than Oklahoma City.
Well, you were chair of the Oklahoma Advisory Committee, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights.
Yes.
And you received the Oklahoma Human Rights Award from the Oklahoma Human Rights Commission. Was that pretty special for you?
Yeah, sometimes you do things not to get awards, but because it's something that needs to be done. And when someone acknowledges it, it is kind of special, very special, to know that people do appreciate what you do. Even though I know from all my past histories that the things I've done may never be appreciated by anybody but me and a few people that know. And that's fine with me. But when someone else acknowledges it, it really does have a bearing. Some of my human rights things is involvement in different groups through the church, through Methodist Church. I've been involved with a number of groups. I was with the Conference Board of, vice chair of the Conference Board of Social Concerns in those days. Now it's called Church and Society, in which we were looking at all the human rights issues in the church. So I was involved with that through the church. And that's been a good thing for me, because it's been a great outlet to be involved at a level which we can have some impact on making some change.
Earl, you mentioned that your Christian faith has been an informative part of your experience. Is there any particular faith story you have that you can share with us in your years of service with the church and in your personal life?
Well, yeah, the best story I can tell you, and it's one that has stuck with me for a long time. I teach in the School of Missions. This year I'm going to be teaching on Darfur and the Sudan. And I usually teach on some geographical aspect of the church. And I've taught on Vietnam, and the biggest one was teaching on South Africa. Now, if bear with me, I have to tell you a story on this, because in 1968, the Women's Division of the United Methodist Church decided to move their funds from the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York City because of the apartheid problem of supporting apartheid. They didn't want any money going to South Africa. That caused quite a stir within the church, because now the church is getting involved with politics. But the women own the money. they can do what they want with it. There's not much anybody can do with it. And since they are the primary arm for global ministries for the United Methodist Church, and so the Chase Manhattan Bank decided they need to do something about this. So you have hierarchy people in the Methodist Church, businessmen, being concerned and raising holy hell about being involved with this politics. But the women were ahead of the game. They discovered that the Methodists didn't know the problems in South Africa. So they had a study in 1973 on the problems of South Africa. I taught in the School of Missions that year and learned all about the problems of South Africa, learned about Nelson Mandela and Steve Biko and the whole history of South Africa. And we had a South African who was of Boer origin, who was a Methodist minister that came here and was part of the program, Don Morton, who was from the bosom of South Africa, who had challenged the South African government. It was persona non grata to him and had to leave his country, leave his family, because he was on the death wish for the government. Came to the United States, Methodist minister. So I got to talk to Don Morton about the problems. And I taught that course. So as you teach the course, I always offer myself to go to churches and teach it. I taught it in the School of Missions, which is held for a long weekend. And I offer people who come to that School of Missions that I will come to your church, help you to teach this program. I got an invitation from Woodward, Oklahoma. In Woodward, Oklahoma, they asked me to come and teach about South Africa. And I go to Woodward, and I teach this course about and give all the information about South, all the problems and what the church has been trying to do, why we took the money out. And most of them were just totally incensed. At that time, Kissinger was meeting with Botha to talk about how we can solve this problem in South Africa, to make some changes. The women in Woodward, Oklahoma, thought they should send something to Kissinger, telling him that the thing he needed to do was to free Nelson Mandela. Because we had talked about the leaders, and Mandela was the person that stood out. Now, this is before anybody in the country really knew that. But that course brought that information out. Here you have Methodist women who learned through a mission program of the problems of South Africa and saying, you need to free Nelson Mandela, is quite a moment for me. It was a eureka moment because it really touched me to no end about what the church is doing and what kind of things you can do with education and the feelings of people in the church in terms of the right thing. Now, this is before anybody in the country was talking about Mandela. Those women knew that. And I consider that to be one of the miraculous things about being involved with the church. And that has touched me for a long time.
Roll back to OSU just a minute. What do you remember about the formation of the OSU Black Alumni Association?
Yes.
OSU Alumni Association.
Yeah. Again, this is the person who really interested in getting that done was really Pat Bell. And she got Smith Holt to put the first money up for the first meetings. So that was even more fascinating. But Pat being a graduate of OSU, undergraduate degree here, PhD at UT Austin, knowing that, and the people she was in school with, there were a large number of people that she was aware of, who she thought had a connection to OSU, but did not have a connection to the university as a whole. So she thought having a Black alumni association would be a way to get those people connected to the university. Because it is also helpful for our students to know that you have all these Blacks who come before you who have gone through some difficult times when they were here and are very successful and are still committed to you. That was the intent, to get that organization started. And so I think getting some of the people involved early, and those who are still involved with it, those graduates, which has been I think, a really good. Bernice and I are now life members of the Alumni Association. We have life membership. We take our life membership, and to be involved with the Black Alumni Association too.
Well, in your opinion, has it been effective in helping maintain relationships among Black alumni and engaging them on behalf of the university?
Yes, it's been effective in the sense that we have more people involved with the Alumni Association who were African Americans in a time period who left here and did not feel good about the university in terms of their experiences. And they bleed orange like you wouldn't believe. They bleed orange. But that experience they had, they look at their experiences and see something now quite different, because even though experience with the institution was not good, the experience with each other has always been great. So they have a support system for themselves, which it's interesting to hear them talk when they come here about the things they did as a group and the camaraderie they had, because they all knew each other. They supported each other, even though they had difficulty in other places. But those things comes out. So all the positive things come out with them. Those negative things become minor. And it's like I've always pushed. If you ever want to see people come together, look at the common things. Then those things that divide us becomes very minor. The problem with us in this country, we've always let the divisive things be the controlling factor. We look at the divisions first. We should look at the common grounds first. Those divisions become very minor.
Well, you received the Black Alumni Association's Trailblazer Award a couple years ago. Was that pretty special for you?
Yeah. Again, you do things and you never expect anything, and it was quite a surprise because I didn't even know I was getting it. And it was kind of a gotcha moment. But yeah, that was very special because it came from a group that is very special to me. And so when your own group does that, it means somebody saw something that maybe others didn't see, and that's very reassuring. It's very helpful.
Great. Well, looking back on your years at Oklahoma State University, how is the biochemistry and I guess in molecular biology now department? How's it changed over the years?
The change has been. In terms of the types of research that's being done, the camaraderie is still the same. And what's interesting is that in the College of Agriculture, in the history of the College of Agriculture, I was the first and only African American. I guess you might say, I can't remember his name now, but Jim, who was in the dean's office from Langston, he had an appointment in Mosley. Jim Mosley had an academic appointment. So I say but he was primarily administrator. He was not a teacher. But I was the only African American member of the Ag Experimentation and Research faculty member until 6 years ago when they hired the second one. And he is in biochemistry, Michael Messiah. So biochemistry now has a tradition. I guess they'll have a black seat now. But we were very fortunate to get Mike Messiah. He's a very outstanding young scientist, very brilliant young man.
Have there been some milestones in the department that you can think about over the years?
Milestones in terms of growth and development, we have moved from a very small department to a fairly large-sized department. I think some of the faculty members that have received awards have been interesting milestones in terms of the Regents professors and the special endowed chairs we have in the department. We have people who left here who are very, very good. We got the last Borden Award was given to Kurt Ebner, who was a member of the department here. That's an outstanding award by the American Chemical Society. Kurt Ebner received that award for some of the work he did. He did work on a special protein in milk protein, which we found out that it was not just a protein for nutrition, but it's part of an enzyme system that helped catalyze pathway in milk and carbohydrate pathway. A great, fantastic discovery. People had this protein around for years, didn't know what it did. He discovered it.
Mm-hmm. Well, along those same lines, are there some professors, administrators you stand in your mind, Earl, over the years and that were important in developing the school, the department?
Yeah, Roger Kepi probably stands out as much as anyone else because he was the leader of the department head. And Roger's pretty much attitude was of service. Roger thought it was important that he would do whatever he could as department head to see that all the faculty had everything they needed to get the work done. Now, there's a degree of paternalism in this because when and we always accuse Roger of being a very benevolent dictator. Benevolent dictator, which we really liked the way he did things because he made sure that everybody had what they needed to get the work done. And so that was really one of the things. I think he was a very good department head in that sense. Being a dictator is not always a thing that you really appreciate because sometimes you do things that make somebody upset, but he always thought about the common good. And that I learned from Roger more than anything else, is that you do what you can to provide service. And the other person, not necessarily, is Norm Durham. Because Norm was my mentor in the graduate college. I worked for Norm as assistant dean of the graduate school. And Norm taught me something that has stuck with me when I became an administrator. And he said, our job is to make it easy for those doing the hard work. It's not about us. And I think one of the problems we have in the university system, in administration, is that there are too many administrators, from presidents on down, who think it's more about them. And Norm Durham said it's about us making it easy for them to do the job. And so our job is to provide service. And so one of the things I did as administrator is I never let any problem go unsolved, in the sense that if someone came to me with a problem and I couldn't help them, I'd find out where they needed to get the help. I would then make sure that they got to the person, and I always told them, come back and tell me what happened. And that, I think, was very effective as an administrator. I was able to get a lot of things solved that way and never have anybody leave my office not knowing where to go or just being left high and dry. And some came to me because they had been to a place that people didn't help them, didn't try to help them. And sometimes you can't help people, but you need to find a way to help them do what they need to do. You may not be what they want to do, but you can find something.
Earl, expanding that question from the department to the university, I mean, you've seen it evolve for, 40 plus years in Oklahoma State. How, in your opinion, has the university changed and evolved?
We've gotten bigger. The fiefdoms have become more fiefdoms in that sense. But I think we have a central administration now that probably does not have the concept of the well-being of everyone as opposed to the well-being of different small units. One of the things that's hard to do is to think about what's the common good, because sometimes the common good is in conflict with individual goods or what individuals or other groups need. There's something bigger, and we've not had that for a while. I have great respect for Burns Hargis. Burns has a common good mentality, but I'm not convinced that the people he has to depend upon has that. And Jay Boggs used to always, Jay Boggs, because Jay was interesting. Jay was a good administrator. Jay said he would meet with the deans. They would have a dean's council meeting. And then they would all agree on what we're going to do. Then each one came back independently, one by one, to get their special deal that they really didn't like this part. And so that's a concept that continues to work at OSU, that people will make a public statement about what they agree and then cut their small deals behind the scene. And so therefore you don't really get the change you need to have.
Well, are you optimistic about the future of Oklahoma State University under President Harkins' leadership?
Yeah, I'm up. I have a degree of optimism about it because I like Burns very much. I think he has all the right attitudes and accolades. But being a person coming from outside the university, not really knowing the one component, the academic component of the university, depending on that from others, makes it vulnerable to things that he probably didn't understand. And because one way you control people is don't give them all the information. That's a very simple process. Or give them all the information that you want them to have.
Earl, can you share some special memories you have at OSU in your 40 years with the university?
Personal.
It's some personal highlights for you, some milestones.
What you turn it? Well, I think the real personal thing that hit me in the university was back in '70 when the black students left the campus in boycott. I was with them every evening. I came and taught my courses. I did my research, and then in the evening I went with the students. And I was driving back and forth every night, getting home at 1 a.m. in the morning and being with the students. At the end of that period, I was really touched by most of the faculty at the time, because I had a lot of faculty calling me and telling me that they were supportive. They wanted to know what they could do to help the students. They probably didn't understand everything about it, but they thought that since I was involved, they had confidence in me. That if I was involved, then there's some problem. That was very, very touching. And the one thing that really got to me and was really, so as I was traveling in the evening, there were two of us getting hate calls. One was Sam Aubrey, and the other one was me, because Sam had dismissed the basketball players. Sam Aubrey is a fine gentleman. He's a member of my church. We go to the same church together. And the two of us were getting hate calls. I came home one night, George Odell was sitting in my living room grading his papers with his gun in his lap. Because I didn't realize that, but there's some phone calls came to the house and Bernice answered. And it was some blankety blank, we don't take care of that blankety blank professor, we're gonna take care of him, we'll be by the house. So she called George, panicked with the kids. George, no, don't worry about it, I'll come down and grade papers. But I'll just bring my gun just in case. I got home, there was George sitting there grading his papers. And me being my positive self, did not know the fear that, because they didn't have cell phones those days to call me and tell me what's going on. And but having George there and having faculty members who didn't know me personally, calling me and telling me that they appreciate what I was doing. And then Bob Comm also told me he appreciated me being out there with the students. That was very sure. He always told me that. Every time he saw me, he said, Earl, he said, you did a good job. I appreciate you being out there. And that was a touching part for me. Very touching part.
Looking back over your experience, and we've looked at several aspects and facets that are kind of maybe conclude this question. What personal and professional accomplishments and recognitions have been especially meaningful to you?
Well, I think being inducted into the Higher Education Hall of Fame was probably most touching.
Oklahoma Higher Education Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's probably most touching because it's a recognition outside the campus. Because most people on that committee that made the decision are not OSU people. And including some who were with the state regent's office at the time. And I had worked with the state regents for a long time on a number of programs. So I've been involved with the state regents for a long time in terms of initiatives, the civil rights initiative with the state regents, their integration cases. So I was always advisory to them for a number of years. But that recognition meant a lot to me because it goes beyond the small little area that I'm involved in.
Well, maybe allow me one more question. Think about this a minute. How do you hope people remember Earl Mitchell?
Yes. Well, I hope people remember me as the positive, jolly person who always thought that people were good and that that things were going to be fine in the future. That I was always positive about, seeing me as a person who was always positive about everything, regardless of how low it was. I can always find I can always see a little light someplace. And I hope people remember me as that kind of person. Not a gloom and doom bug guy.
Well, you're retired now, Earl. We'll close on this one, but what are you going to do with the rest of your life? I mean,
the rest of my life.
So what's on your bucket list? What you want to do before you kick the bucket?
Yes.
Anything else you got there?
Well, no, I don't have any personal agenda other than the one thing I need to do is I've started putting down some memoirs. I need to write some things. These things I'm talking about here, I need to go into some detail about a number of different things in terms of things that happened to me in my 40 years here. But I think there are a lot of things about my family and growing up in New Orleans that I'd like to share with people. So I need to write something. That's mainly what I want to do. And particularly about the family. I've been doing family history, family tree, and so I'm learning things about family and things that struggles some people have had, which I'd like to put down. And I had a great aunt. See, I'm probably one of the few people who has Muslims in the family, Christians, and Jews. My grandkids are Jewish because my daughter-in-law is Jewish. So we celebrate Hanukkah. I just had my granddaughter's bat mitzvah a couple of weeks ago. My grandson's bar mitzvah in 2 years. I had a great aunt who was a very devout Muslim. She taught me about the Quran and Muslim life. And so I learned a lot. And she was very devout about Muslim. So religious-wise, those are the kind of things I like to share. And she told me a lot of stories about sharecropping when she was a little kid, what happened, moving around from different parts of Mississippi and Louisiana. Interesting story she's given me.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else we left out? Anything you want to
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.